Excellent. So Matt Gilchrist, John, Bob, Jim, Adam, Matt, and Trenton. Yours here as well. Excellent. We are all here. So I kind of feel a little bit better after, so let's call the meeting to order. And I feel a little bit better about our first meeting and our progress now that I know that other groups haven't even met once and we're having our second one. Especially after I talked to Jim, and he even said, he goes like, you guys kind of need to know what the rest of us decide before you can get too far along. And so that was good. So I used that feedback in coming up with our agenda for today. And I think our meeting can be pretty short, depending on how we want to address these two paths. The first path is to map the current process, and then I think we need to do that for like each one of the different zones. So the 0 to 2000, what does that process look like? Whose hands are involved with it? And if we can have a quick publicized, this is that process for a normal area, this is that process for a sensitive area. And then the 2,700, what is this process? How is that clearly defined? And then the 7,500 and above process. And then try to plug in all the places where multiple agencies get to influence that process. Because once we define it and we map it, then we can start to target areas for standardization and improvement. Does that make sense to everybody, or am I barking up the wrong tree? I see some head nodding.
Yeah, that will give us at least a foundation for us to work on, and then expand or modify it if need be.
Right. And I mean, Jim, we were talking before we started the meeting, and you kind of said, you could write the process for the 0 to 2000, in your sleep and backwards, because you live it every day. Would you be willing to step up and just map that out for us? And we're going to record this meeting, and then I think we'll take that recording and kind of, I'll try to work on, developing like a Visio map of that, if that works. Unless somebody has a better idea.
Well, I was just thinking that maybe I can try to make boxes based on that elaborate layout, that in order to get something approved, and I can work on that and share that from
Adam's one that we got the other day. That we don't want anything that complicated. That is a masterpiece.
Yeah, so I'll come up with something and share that with the group before our next meeting.
Right, so you don't mind mapping that out,
and then I could try to map out even from 2,000 gallons to 7,500, just to have a foundation, and then Matt can look at that, and I can look at maybe even doing something from 7,500 or greater. As I was telling Matt before, recently I've been getting plans from Deep on projects, and Deep doesn't even notify us when they're even going out there and doing soil testing. So it just seems like I don't get any word until a plan has been approved and a septic installer is looking for inspections. In the Chatham Health District, we required a septic installer to take out a permit, even though it's not required in section 104. But if we're out there doing inspections, we need to get paid. We're not doing it, free of charge. So depends on what the scope of the inspection or the system going in dictates the cost that we will charge. We have a bunch of trailer parks. If they're doing a septic repair on a trailer park for an individual trailer, we just charge them a regular septic fee of, I think it's $185. But if it's a septic repair for a big condominium complex with 16 apartments, and that's an elaborate size septic system, then we charge a price of right now of $500 to go out there multiple times to do the inspection. So that's just the Reader's Digest version here at the local level.
Now, if you don't mind, I mean, I can literally in 30 seconds just give a real quick version, and then Jim can obviously take it and put it to paper in more detail, but I'll just go through those 3 categories if you want. It'll take me 30 seconds to do it. So 0 to 2,000 assumes that there's no DPH involvement needed at all. So everything gets done at the local level. So if you are a developer, you're going into the health department, and typically that project gets routed through all of the town agencies and signed off on, and then they go ahead and conduct a review, and everyone goes on their merry way. 2,000 to the current 7,500, which is DPH's jurisdiction and local health. That same process happens. So after that process happens, the locals then take that application with a review fee, and they send it up to us. So why that's important that gets routed to the locals is because obviously up at the state, there's only 3 of us and regional engineers. We don't know what's going on in the town. We don't know zoning laws. We don't know what the specifics are on the ground. So it's crucial that everything gets worked out at the local level first. So I don't want to see it. I don't want to see a project if it hasn't been through zoning and, they haven't signed off on it. It would waste my time reviewing a project, let's say, that's not been signed off on. So bottom line is that gets routed to the locals, comes to us. We conduct our review. We give an approval. The locals go out. We hand the baton back to them. They do the inspections of the system and do a permit. So that's pretty much it. The only other thing I will mention is that if it is over 2,000, a lot of times meaning the DPH, would like to come out there and witness the soil testing if possible. So we usually ask that the locals, at their convenience, usually we work around them, that they give us a call, perhaps a week in advance, and say, hey, we're going out there and conducting testing this day. You're welcome to attend. Now, over 7,500, and Jim brought up a really good point. That process is haphazard and all over the place. That's the process with Deep. And I'll tell you what's haphazard. And this is what I hear from my people, meaning the local health departments. It's all over the place. Some health departments do what Jim's doing. Deep has an arrangement sometimes, perhaps not all the time, where they rely on them for inspections and the so-called boots on the ground. And then, as Jim pointed out, they charge fees for that. But some other health departments, they never hear a thing, and they don't even know what the heck's going on in their town. So it's all over the place. I will say B104, which is in the public health code, it's the regulations that talk about Deep's responsibilities. specifically says that they are to notify the locals. And so whether that's done consistently, that's another matter. But if you want to check out B104, so basically at the end of the technical standards document that you can get online for us or anywhere else for that matter, you will see that written there. But that's in a nutshell. That's the three tiers of process. You got locals and DPH, and then you have exclusively deep with perhaps once in a while some local involvement.
So you said something that was really interesting in both the 2000 and the 0 to 2000 and the 2000 to 75. You know, before you guys review a 2000 to 7500, you want P&Z review. I mean, approval. It has to be fully approved. This is a shovel-ready project before you want to look at it. You know, where, you know, with the locals, what's happening to me a lot is in the 0 to 2000 or the larger is I have to go in before I go to planning and zoning and before I go to wetlands. I have to go in and say I have a viable project where I have septics that I've proven to the local health department can be built on these 26 lots. So, you know, even to the extent that I'm doing an open space subdivision, I had to prove 26 conventional locations first, and then I had to go back and prove 26 open space locations because that's how they wanted it written. So, you know, that's putting a burden on the health department that I have to go and have that health department come and look at all my perk tests, you know, observe everything that I'm doing. And then, you know, we go through this whole process only to get to planning and zoning to have that basically said, oh, you know what, we don't want you to do that many. We're only going to approve 20. Well, now I got to go do them all over again because 20 lots are got different lot lines and I got to find different places to put my septics. So you're saying that you would only look at a 2,7500 once planning and zoning approved it.
Well, yeah, I shouldn't, I guess I want to make sure that the project is at least approvable. What we don't want to see, Matt, is we don't want us getting involved in these fights. So in other words, we're not on anybody's team, so to speak. And, you know, I know where you guys, I know the position you're in, and you're like, well, we want you to be able to say that these are viable septics, then we can go to zoning and everything else. That's just a tough position to be in because I don't want to be in a position of defending your project. Not that I could care either way, but it's just, I want to stay neutral, I meaning the state. So we're in a very precarious position. Plus, recently, over the past year, we've had attorneys reviewing all of our approval documents. And in the past, we used to be able to do things called conditional approvals and all kinds of, you know, little things like that. All of that has been completely taken away from us. And we have almost virtually no wiggle room with how we approve things. In other words, in the past, we could again, you know, say, all right, upon, it's like sometimes you guys have to combine lots in order to, you know, to get your project. And sometimes we've been able to work. We say, look, I would write my approval document upon, you know, combining of the lots. You know, this application is approved. I can't do stuff like that anymore. So it's very complicated, but I get where you're like in a catch-22. This one will only approve it if this one gets it first, says it's okay, but this one won't do it because of that one. I got it. I mean, if we can work something that, I mean, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, but again, what I don't want to be is in a position where I'm defending or not defend or in a position where I'm, you know, basically negative against the project. I want to just
you want to enforce the science.
Yeah.
But who was up first, John or Jim? I'm sorry, I was looking at my notebook. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I don't know what towns you work in, but all the towns that I've worked here in with the Chatham Health District is usually the Wetlands Commission is the first commission that they have to jump the hurdle. And during that
Mhm.
time frame, they might have even submitted a subdivision plan already in front of wetlands, and I'm still going out there and doing my soil testing, witnessing the soil testing. And then once they get by wetlands, then they go into the planning commission. And there's been many times when during my process reviewing this stuff that it has gone and been approved by the Wetlands Commission. It's in the hands of the Planning Commission, and they're just waiting for me to come up with my overall response that every each lot of these proposed subdivision, the well and septic system conforms to the Connecticut Public Health Code, section 1913 B103DD, which means that each septic system is on the same lot as the house is served, and 1913 B51D, which means that the location of the well conforms to all the proper separation distances. And then once I provide that final response, then the planning commission will then ultimately issue out the review. I've never been involved in any of the towns where they're waiting for my letter of approval before it went through wetlands and through the planning commission. This all seems to be all three agencies are sort of working simultaneously.
John?
Yeah, this is interesting. And maybe we're getting to some of the heart of this, because from a municipal standpoint, particularly for slightly larger and more complicated developments, that obviously, subdivisions are a little bit different, but I'm talking about, multifamily in a rural area, or heaven forbid, an affordable housing appeal. Planning and zoning, generally speaking, will not decide until the appropriate health authority has reviewed and said this is capable of handling the flow. Because, particularly for an 830G affordable housing appeal, public health and safety is the whole shooting match. And very often the commission and opponents are looking for some doubt amongst the public health community that this septic system is appropriate for this site, as a way to deny or downsize the development. But insofar as zoning's job is to assure orderly development that supports public health, safety, and welfare, DPH, local health department, whatever, has got to make a call, at least about the reasonable feasibility, before planning and zoning is going to say anything. And I don't know how that changes. And so I would hope, Matt, and I'm sorry, Matthew Pollock, it's hopefully a little bit more black and white. I know DEP has a little bit more of a black box standards for alternative systems and stuff like that. But for a standard septic system, community septic system of some type, or large 5,000 gallons, whatever, it's got to be fairly objective. Either it meets or doesn't, right?
Yeah, I should have been, and when I say we want to see, as long as most of the major things, I think the major thing that I would think of that it's a no-go at this point would be like if you have to combine lots, or if there's some type of, ideally, we would want to see all of this stuff hashed out for the most part. But it's something Jim's group or the locals would definitely feel comfortable enough signing off on it at the local level, or at least acknowledging that stuff before it comes to me, because that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to review the plan and make sure the septic plan, that is, and make sure that those things are hashed out. But I should have been more clear on that. Ideally, I mean, there's some wiggle room there, because we're not going to make our review contingent upon this, that, and the other thing. Our review is our review. We issue an approval. But like I said, ideally, we don't want to get caught in any outside fights, so to speak. And that's why we'd prefer that.
Bob?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So you raised some interesting questions, and it's sort of like we maybe have to differentiate single family development from multifamily. Multifamily typically would not have significant changes through the approval process. I think in my mind, I'm kind of speaking out loud and thinking out loud, where subdivisions with single family lots, a lot of times we're proposing a house, and you're getting your approval based on a proposed footprint, proposed septic location, proposed well, but then there's typically always a review when you submit your actual application because it's all conceptual. We're showing a 2,000 square foot, 4-bedroom house with a two-car garage, and then we get a buyer and it changes the whole plan. You could, in theory,
100 square feet with.
yeah, you could approve a 500 square foot house with a two bedrooms and say, I've got a lot here. And that's not what I want to build. I want to build 4-bedroom colonials.
Yeah, that's
Um,
not what we're talking about, Bob. Definitely. We're talking about the bigger projects that are
yeah,
going to be over 2,000, which would
yeah,
be typically multifamily,
right.
not single family.
And
Correct.
so there's not usually a lot of changes in the multifamily. I mean, you've got a footprint or, the general layout of it, where the community system's going to go and that sort of thing. And there's probably not a lot of changes, but on the single family, it's always conceptual. And we have fights with wetlands and planning and zoning all the time because they start nitpicking, sight lines or something that, not relative to what we're talking about, but things that really don't matter because when you ultimately get there to build, it's going to be totally different than what your initial approval is. So we may just want to separate the thought process between single family subdivisions and what we're talking about here with the 2,000 to 7,500, which usually aren't major changes unless it gets changed during the process. Now, it could get changed. You end up at DOT and all of a sudden they decide they don't like the sight line and your access driveway is moving on top of where your septic was or something like that. And that's just another step where they won't look at it either until you're done with your local approvals.
And I think that's a great point to bring up is this is really falling in that 2,700 gallons per day, limit where, I felt frustration in my single family because I had to do it 3 different ways. And the health department that I was using was as frustrated as I was. They felt like they were having to jump through hoops because the planning and zoning and the wetlands officials were basically trying to find any reason they could not to approve the lots. So, we pulled them in and out and jerked them around forever. And they had to give us like 2 days a week for like 5 weeks in order to get all this work done. And that was a horrible drain on their resources. But this 2,000 to 7,500, like that's where we have to drill down. Because that's where the affordability does come. That's where we have the small community septics and the shared septics. Um, and that's where we have to drill down because, we're hearing on one side the DPH won't give us a conditional, and they want to give us a reason. They only want to review a reasonably feasible job that the local health department has already approved. So, like, I think that's kind of what we have to rally around is before it goes to DPH, we have to have a reasonably feasible project that DPH has already approved. You're still going to have to go to state traffic review to make sure that you're not overburdening the local street. You're still going to have to go to X, Y, and Z. But in order to get it to DPH, it has to meet that criteria. So does that sound like kind of a key wicket that we have to put into this process when Jim writes that out?
Again, I apologize if I didn't expand earlier. I or the Chatham Health District will never send anything up to DPH without our total review and total compliance with the request. So, i.e., somebody's doing a septic repair and they want a well variance. I'm not setting up the engineer's or septic installer's plan, how it's submitted, missing a whole bunch of information. I'm not submitting that until I feel comfortable that it met 100% of the requirements in order for the DPH to approve the well variant. And that would be the same thing that if we're between over 2,000 gallons to 7,500, I'm not sending anything up to DPH until it meets 100% of the technical standards. Now, maybe I might miss something, or DPH might see something differently than I am, but I'm not sending them a plan until I know that I'm comfortable that it meets the technical standards. So nothing gets sent up to DPH without local review being 100% as best they can in compliance with the technical standards. And just a quick question, Matt. There's a fee, right, for your DPH reviews on septic systems?
Yes, that's correct. And to Jim's point, yes, he's saying that's exactly how it should play out, the way Jim's just said it. Exactly. And it is. It's $625 for a single over 2,000 gallon per day system. So $625 review fee for us.
Thank you.
So, Bob, before I give you the floor, I want to ask a question. Maybe you can kind of answer it. I haven't done a lot of community septics. I kind of stay away from them just because, I do. Like, you're afraid of what you don't know. So, when you're going through an approval process on a community septic, say it's a 5,500 gallon a day septic that you're going to put in, where do you go for this approval? Do you have to have your P&Z done, or are you doing this in order to make application to P&Z?
Yeah, Matt, as you, I don't do a lot of these. I think I've just done one project down in Essex that had a community septic. So I'm less familiar with the process. Typically, it's got to be a fully approved septic before they're going to approve your entire subdivision. My big question, Jim, was you raised an interesting point, is that you're fully reviewing and basically approving the system. And is DPH just sort of giving you a second set of eyes? It seems like a duplicate process, but it could be that you're very well qualified to do the review, and there may be some locals that don't have that capability. And is that why it goes to DPH? I'm just trying to understand why it has to go through that two-step process, and if it could just be done at the local level, or should it only be done at the state level, or what's the reasoning behind doing both steps?
Again, I think the state of Connecticut is very unique in their processing of reviewing for subsurface sewage disposal systems. I don't think there's many states locally that have this three-tier approach, but my review and DPH review are all based on the Connecticut Public Health Code Section 1913 B103 and the current 2024 technical standards. Local and DPH, we do not have different codes. We have the same code and the same regulation, the same technical standards that we need to follow.
All right, so now let's just take it one step further. If we want to do the 7,500 and above system, so on a giant community septic, and I have to design it. I have to, come up with my plot plan. Got to get through appeased wetlands, come up with my plot plan, and then design my septic system and put it in my roads, and everything has to be done. I then take that to the local health department. They're going to, do all the test pits with me and everything, review it. We're probably going to have to call Deep, or I just don't even talk to you, Jim. You're small fries. I don't need you.
No, you come to me. Let's say that you come to me, and I'm looking at this big condominium complex that's going to be, 10,000 gallons. I'm going to say, reach out to Deep, and then also then I'll have you reach out to the town planner and wetlands agents and talk to them. And that would be it. I do no reviews, none whatsoever, on a DEP system. All I do is we require a permit fee for the inspections, and I do all the inspections. Deep doesn't do any inspections. I do the inspections. And then once I sign off on it, then the engineer has to come up and do submit an as-built plan to Deep, and then Deep should sign off on it, and then we should get a copy of that as-built plan along with if even Deep issues out a permit to discharge. So local is only involved per section 1913 B104 to do the inspections.
Okay. So Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to actually go back to Bob's question, like why, and I'll give you my opinion and the historical, like why is DPH looking at this stuff? And I think I can give you two reasons. Number one is most local or most designs done by the local health department are small septic systems. So let's say 90% of their workload. And so they're not as familiar a lot of times. A lot of these are commercial and it depends on the district, of course, but for the most part that they're not doing those all the time. So I think that the fact that we would have a level of expertise oftentimes and maybe perhaps a little more detail and more experience with these systems. So I think the thought was that by sending it up to us, DPH that is, there's going to be that extra more detailed set of review. Not that the locals aren't competent, but they certainly are. But again, just the level of experience because they don't do a lot of those. I think another reason for this, and this is something that would benefit you actually, if I'm a local developer, is you by sending it to us, it removes there's local politics involved sometimes. And I'm going to speak frankly here. I mean, some of these projects, there's pressure. There's pressure on the locals to approve certain things or not approve certain things. And by sending it to us, it kind of takes it out of that politics sometimes. And it sort of makes this, I think it takes that negative aspect of that out of it because now it's out of this town that there's these different agencies fighting amongst or different groups, whoever. And now you got the state that's looking at it. They're unbiased. They don't care. And so I think that's another reason why. And oftentimes it's funny, the locals appreciate that in some cases. They're like, this is a real hot potato for me. The mayor's pushing for me to approve this or whatever. And I feel uncomfortable. I'm glad it's going to you or something like that. So that perhaps could have been something to do with it as well.
Excellent. And then great explanation. I'm going to back now to I don't need Jim for my 7,500 above one. He's just going to expect it at the end of the day. Do I need you for my 7,500 above?
Not at all. I don't want to know about it. I mean, technically, they're supposed to notify both us and the locals, but honestly, I got enough to do. But
All right. So since we don't have a deep representative, I think that we should just dictate that we get a stamp whenever it goes to deep.
yeah, for sure.
All in favor?
That would ease the process. Sure.
Well, one
Hopefully,
other thing I just want to mention, Matt, too, is, when you go to deep, it's not just the review. You become almost a sewer utility. You're regulated. So it's so by them upping the design flow increase for jurisdiction purposes to 10,000, that unto itself coming to us and the locals is going to free up the fact that you don't have to be a utility forever and basically monitor your wastewater and pay an operator in some cases and things like that. So just that alone was a tremendous victory for development, just straight out the gate. Forget about how we review things in terms of the technical aspect of it. In this case, we're looking for nitrogen, but a very watered down version in many cases. So just want to throw that into the mix too. That you're a utility. You're almost a utility when you become under deep's jurisdiction. So it's not just the initial review can be cumbersome. It's the whole everything after that.
And that's a great point. Like we've been talking about how it is right now. With the change in 2026, it's going to go to 10,000, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So your threshold is now 10,000. But all the rules are the same. Is it 2,000 to 10,000 or is it? We don't get any upside on the bottom. We stop to.
Sometimes you want me to review it in some cases, because sometimes at certain times I'm thinking I have Fairfield County. They're so swamped sometimes they can't get to, not that I'm not either, but they can't get to review. So they can say, well, hey, we'll look at it quick and we'll send it up to the state. And so you might want it from me. So that's not a negative usually, sending it to us.
Okay. So Jim, are you still on board with writing this up with the squares and the dots and the arrows, and then getting that to us before our meeting next week? And then I think it'd be good for us to all and take what Jim gives us, and like we can write our interjection points how we understand it. So then we can recap this next week, and we can kind of drill down to see, okay, where are areas for improvement, where are the bottlenecks. And one thing that, Matt and Jim should really look at is, your staffing, your manning, like how is this affecting the locals? How is it affecting the state? Where do you need improvement in order to prevent delays? Because we're talking $625 for a view. I'll spend $10,000 on a traffic study in order to place sewer monitors in the city of New Haven. I'm not even talking about in order to do my job. I have to spend $10,000 to get a traffic study so I can monitor the sewer flow. So like $625, sign me up twice on Tuesdays. Like
it's
I'm
cup
in.
of coffee. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's the delay that kills us.
Sure.
So like, and finding out that, hey, I got everything to deep, but they don't want, I mean, deep DPH, but they don't want to make a call on it until I have, X, Y, and Z. So like now I got a delay, and I get into that circular logic that my Excel spreadsheet can't handle. So that's the places that I'm going to look for in this diagram, in this map of how do we avoid those circular delays. One, so nobody's wasting your time, Matt. Nobody's wasting Jim's time, and John can make sure that the project that he's working on gets approved in a timely fashion. So, us builders don't lose our minds.
Yeah, so I think what you're asking, and this is something both Jim and I would have to answer, would be like our internal reviews. Like, do we have the staff and the resources to do these reviews in a timely manner? And if you want us to get into the details there, that's certainly something I'd be willing to do. I will say that, we went from 0 to 5,000, and then we went from 5,000 essentially to 10,000. So we took half of Deep's work and got zero resources for it. Zero, nothing, not a single staff, nothing. And not only that, but my program's duties have expanded to include 2 other programs, public pools and campgrounds. So, and with the same amount of staff. So the workload has increased, and exponentially, and here we are doubling essentially our jurisdiction with no increase in staff or resources, none, from 5 to 10. So that's my situation in a nutshell.
Is that called an unfunded requirement?
Yeah. It's not fun, let's put it that way.
Not just to give you a little insight from the local standpoint. I had a 32 lot subdivision in Colchester. I did 100 and close to 160 test pits, by myself. We just had another 10 lot subdivision come in, and I had help from two of my other fellow sanitarians. So depends on what the size of the subdivision is, and my fellow sanitarians, their workload. I can grab one or 2 people in order to expedite witnessing the test pits. Technically, the public health code states that the local health department, all we have to do is witness the test pits. We don't need to technically dive down into the test holes and physically read them. We wanted to hold developers, by their feet, and have them even spend more money by having an engineer or soil scientist out there reading the test holes, and then we would just go in there. Oh, okay, this is modelings at 32 inches. I agree with you, but the Chatham Health District, we're not doing perk tests for a brand new septic system for even for a subdivision. We don't have the time, manpower to sit there and pre-soak it and then run the perk tests for the primary and reserve leaching areas. We look at roughly, our health district, we look at roughly 4 test pits per lot. So if you got a 10 lot subdivision, we're looking at a minimum of 40 test pits. And then we charge $145 per lot. And if you do more than that, then we add an extra, I think an extra $45 fee on that. But I can grab resources, but poor Matt's office, you're looking at 169 towns there. Not every town has septic systems, but you're looking at the whole state of Connecticut, and his work group is 3 to 4 people. So that's you can see where everything that gets funneled down to or up from my point to DPH. But then again, I'm not doing septic systems, as I said before. Restaurant inspections, daycare inspection, a child with an elevated blood level. I'm out there doing the lead testing. I'm out there collecting water samples for bathing water. I've got to investigate complaints at apartment complex because the landlord, turns off the heat on the tenant. So what I do locally is also, very huge too.
Matt, you're on mute.
That's going to be the third part of our tasking is, we have a requirement that you guys are going up to 10,000, and we're going to be asked, okay, well, how do we fund this? How do we fund it in order to make sure that there's not a backlog, there's not a bottleneck, that you have enough reviewers to get this stuff done, and that you're only having to hit the things that you have to hit. But for today, I feel like we kind of got through number one. Jim, I really appreciate you putting pen to paper or digital pen to paper, however, and getting that out to us. And then we'll make that a working document, and we'll fill it all in. So we have this good map that we're going to basically, highlight any deficiencies and any delays and make sure that, we have a clear path. And then, one of the things that Jim, when I was talking to him before, not you, Jim Paris, he said, one thing that could come out of this is just a standardization of the path. Because while Jim has a very clear-cut way that he does it, and he's been doing it a very long time, there are new health departments, new regional health departments that aren't as efficient. And to have that prescriptive path versus a more fluid path would really help everybody, including DPH, because then you only are having to deal with the things that you're actually supposed to have to deal with. So the next part of the agenda was to find and schedule subject matter experts who can help us define agency roles and jurisdictions and identify overlaps or gaps in authority, and to clarify the statutory and practical boundaries between all these different groups. That's a lot of mouthful for. Are there people who are not in this group that we think would be interesting to have them come in and talk to us? Maybe somebody who's been at Deep and is now retired. Somebody who's been at DPH and is now retired, or another engineer who has a wealth of knowledge, or a Deep official from Massachusetts or Rhode Island that we want to emulate something in their process or their policy. And we can try to brainstorm those now, or we can brainstorm them on our own and bring those to our next meeting if that makes sense to you guys.
I think an engineer that's done a bunch of big projects like this, and so has been through the entire process, both locally and in DPH, that might be a good perspective for you to have.
Okay.
I mean, it's unfortunate we don't have a Deep representative here just to do what I'm doing, to just describe what their program does. I mean, that obviously we all could agree that's helpful, but definitely an engineer that's been through this process that could give you some tips on, some of the stuff. I mean, some of these engineers, I've been through with these different issues and these fights in the towns and things like that. But one thing I just want to say too, real quick about my review, if you guys do make changes, you guys meaning the developers, that's fine. Like if I approved something, approved a development and all of a sudden, oops, you got to change it, or you're going to take away a house, you just come back. And a lot of times, just a quick send to the locals. Okay, these are the changes. I look at it. Sometimes I'll work out something with them where we look at it concurrently if it's a small change, and we usually get that out pretty quick. So you're not locked in. If you got to make changes, you make changes. As long as they meet the code, I don't care. And actually, we don't charge a review fee. Not that $675 is going to break the bank anyway, but we don't even charge a brief review fee. So it's actually a good deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other engineer? I might know a couple I'm going to talk to. But John, I think one thing you and I need to really work on is we need to put some pressure to get a deep representative here. Like it's a huge hole in this working group. So
right, yeah. And there is a deep representative, I think, on one of the other groups that was
it Audra?
Yeah. And I don't know, we could, if she's the only one, we'll have to invite her to
Well, there is somebody else. I don't mean to, there's my counterpart.
Okay.
And I don't know why. I don't even think she's even on this work group at all. Let me see if I can get her name. Hold on one second. I'm drawing a blank here. Lauren Jones. I'm sorry. Wait a minute there. Lauren, Lauren Jones. She's my counterpart at Deep that handles the systems from 75 to whatever and all ATs.
Oh, yeah.
Ideally, she should be here because she knows the process. Now, one quick point that Matt said is the retired supervisor. There was a guy, Mike Hart, was the former Deep. So you could maybe he'd be willing. He's retired now about 4 or 5 years, or maybe more than that. But anyway, perhaps if you can't get somebody from Deep to come here that's active, maybe you can get him to come on. Not sure, but Mike Hart, Hart.
great.
Okay. Well, yeah, we can reach out.
I don't want to get ourselves wrapped around the weeds, but there are more septic systems right now being installed that are less than 7,500 gallons per day, and then once the 10,000 gallons is adopted, are going to be a lot more septic systems that are going to fall underneath DPH and local health departments review before Deep's review. So deep systems are going to be far and few in between as the future comes near.
Yeah, I think it's like 95% will be under the 95% of the gallons are under the 10,000.
Yeah.
Have people generally, and this may be a question for Matt and Bob, have you guys basically avoided DEP alternative systems basically because of the sort of the black box nature of what the DEP is doing? Like,
I avoid Deep at all possible costs.
That's sort of what I heard repeatedly from, and what's the way around that? I mean, I guess we've heard, and I may be getting too far afield, like, some off the shelf alternative systems that are sort of pre-vetted that could be, sort of pre-approved and installed for certain circumstances. Like, how do we bust through
Something
that?
I would really like to do that are the full containment unit that basically what comes out of them is basically water that, clear water. And then the tanks get pumped every year, and you do each individual household has one, and then there's a huge soaking field for the clear water. It's not even gray water, I've looked at them, but I haven't been gutsy enough to do it yet.
Well, if you guys want me to give you a little nickel explanation on that whole thing, I can do that. So that is coming our way, DPH's way. But why that is so challenging again, it's just a plug and play. We call them little black boxes.
Right.
Basically, they're all inclusive little treatment systems. The what I call the Achilles heel of those is maintenance. Okay, so normally people have a septic system, they got to just pump the tank out, and even that somebody can wing it, and sometimes they can go 10 years if they're not using a lot. So they don't have to do anything. They just flush the toilet. These, on the other hand, being mechanical devices, they require maintenance. So, and you might say, okay, no big deal, but with that then comes you have to track it. And you might say, well, why do you care about that? Because we've talked to other states. Sometimes there's a benefit of being the last person to do something, meaning Connecticut's the last one. We learn from others' mistakes. So we've talked extensively. So the main thing is A, tracking them, and B, getting people to keep them maintained so they work. And so, like, they would go back and find out Rhode Island, 10 years down the road or 5 years down the road that half of them aren't even functioning anymore. And if they're not tracking it, that's not a good thing. So the main thing is setting up a program that's different than what we have now, where you actually have a tracking mechanism, which means a lot of work. Somebody's got to enter that data in. And then you have to have an enforcement component of that too, because homeowners are going to be very, when they're struggling economically, they're not going to want to pay the bill for maintenance. Sometimes these things use a bunch of electricity and they just unplug them. So those are the kind of things that you have to do that it's different than what we do right now. And that takes so they would have to we were going to have to build a program from scratch, and that, thank God, is hopefully not going to be me, because I got enough on my plate. But another branch of our program is going to sit down and do that for that reason. It's a tracking and maintenance thing. And I like the model, what I thought was great in Long Island, and that was they basically made a group of vendors come in that say, okay, I have this little box, and they have to get approved by us. And if they have, and so the homeowner once a year has to have the water tested, and if they're not passing, and the maintenance company keeps getting a lot of those, they get taken off the list, so they can't sell anymore. So what happens is it's in they almost become the regulators. They chase down people and they make sure they're doing the right thing, because if their product is not functioning properly, they get taken off the list. So there's an incentive for them to go out there and hound the homeowners, so to speak, to do the right thing. So that I kind of like that model. But anyway, it's all about the maintenance and stuff like that. And honestly, guys, the other thing, and I keep telling leadership, there's a huge decision that has to be made here with these. You either allow these to go in where, and I'm sure as developers, you're going to want this choice A, where you can somehow make a smaller septic system, a conventional septic system. In other words, take a property that might not be developable now, put one of these little boxes on there, and now you can develop it. That's one choice. Or the other choice is we just use them for existing properties or challenging properties, and we just put them on there as an enhancement to say, let's say, remove the nitrogen. So those are the two decisions. The scary part, though, with the first one, though, and this is what Rhode Island did, you go out there and you look at the coastline and you see these salt marshes with mansions on them because they developed them. And this is the same state that was saying in 5 years, none of these things are working. And so when these things fail, it's not like a conventional septic where you see sewage on the ground or you get smells. It's the nutrients are just going into the ground. So there's no obvious failure. So you're actually polluting the environment, and it's not an obvious thing. So that's the kind of thing that would keep me up at night if we did go that route, unless we had a good maintenance program. A monitoring program rather, that tracked these things and ensured that these things are working, so we can be assured that we're not polluting the environment. And something that it won't manifest itself in 5 years. It might be 10 years, but in 10 years, you could cause all kinds of degradation and things like that with these if they're not functioning.
It's almost like your approval process isn't just the science of it. Your approval process has to be the longevity and the maintenance of it.
Yeah.
So like it has to be a homeowners association with a maintenance contract, and it's paid for by the homeowner association, not the individual homeowner. Like you take away all those controls and you pull those all into a central location for community health. You can't rely on individual health. I get that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bob, but I was just about to wrap it up, but we're at our 2 hours and
Yeah,
I don't want to take
I'll be
anybody's.
quick. I just want to respond to John. John, one of the things is I've never done a deep system, but I've heard the horror stories, and I would avoid it at all costs with never going through the process. And that's quite honestly one of the reasons that DPH now has the systems between 5,000 went to 75, and now is going to 10,000. Is the regulated community, said we don't want to deal with Deep's program. Let's get it to DPH. And unfortunately, DPH started taking on some of those things that Deep was doing, and that was kind of some of our pushback, quite honestly, was we like the way you're doing it. If you're going to do it just like Deep, we'll just go to Deep. And we didn't want to have that happen. That's really kind of some of the background of how we ended up where we are today. Also, it's interesting you guys are saying that if 95% of the systems are going to be under 10,000 gallons and under DPH control, I don't know that we have to spend a lot of time looking at the deep systems, because if we're on such a short time frame here, knowing we have to be done by mid-January or something, let's focus on the ones that we can do. One thing you could help me with, and I know a little bit about it, but I'm not as clear as I should be, is like how many bedrooms or how many units? I know the bedrooms or the unit size dictates the gallons per day, because the first bedroom is more than the rest. But how many units or bedrooms are we dealing with? What's a trigger at 2,000 and what's a trigger at 7,500 or what will eventually be 10,000? If we're talking about 100 bedrooms at 10,000, then that's a pretty good sized system for almost every development that's going to happen in Connecticut. And also is like, what's a trigger that goes over the 2,000? Is it 15 bedrooms or is it 25 bedrooms? And I, in my mind, don't know what that is. So if you guys could guide us a little bit, not just looking at just the gallons, but being able to convert the gallons to sort of bedroom counts or unit counts would be kind of helpful, just to have an understanding of what size systems we're dealing with.
Yeah, I can just give you a quick touch. I don't have my calculator, but here's the good news though. We've reduced the multifamily flows, and we're going to look at it as a collective for a lot. So let me just grab
Yeah.
my apologies
And
here.
Matt, we don't have to do this now. Maybe just as
Yeah.
part of this process that Jim's going to work on, you could say is, systems that are X number of gallons, but also that translates into 15 to 30 bedrooms or 15 to 30 units or something like that. So we just have a little better grasp for us lay people
And
have a
so
better understanding of how many units we're talking about and what triggers these things.
Yeah, no, you can. So Jim, here's what we're thinking of doing. The first three bedrooms, let's say a multifamily development, is going to be the 150 gallons, so 450. Then after that, I think it's 137, but let me get you that. And then you can easily come up with the number of bedrooms. I just did 66 at 150. That was the old number. So in other words, 150 times 66 is basically just shy of 7,500. But I think it's much more than that, because again, we go down. We're not at 150 bedrooms. For the it's 125.
The 125
Yeah.
for the fourth bedroom on.
Yep.
and that's basically ad infinitum, like so 150, 150, 150, and then 125 into
Exactly. Well, I'll do right now. Let's
wow,
see.
okay. All right.
And
Well,
it's- And a single family home, the same thing, 3 bedrooms, 150 gallons per bedroom, 450, and then it's 75 gallons per bedroom after that in a single family house. But commercial properties, those are a total different animal based on what the process that they're doing.
All right, I just did the numbers, guys. It's 79 bedrooms. So let me just show you what I just did. So basically, so you have a multifamily development with 79 bedrooms is going to be just shy of 10,000. And where did I get that number? The first three of those 79 bedrooms has to be assessed at 150, so that's 450. So I took 10,000 minus 450, and which came to 9,550, and then I divided that by 125, which is all of the bedrooms beyond that, and that's where I came up with 76, and then 76 plus 3, 79.
Excellent.
Cool.
Awesome. I think this was a much better meeting than the first one. I really appreciate everybody's input and And Jim, thank you for taking on the first task here and the heavy lift. We look forward to seeing you when you get those to us. That'd be great. Then we can all, look at them before the 10 o'clock meeting next Tuesday. If you didn't see the emails, we have no meeting tomorrow unless you're on Sonia's group. Other than that, can I get
Matt,
a
when
motion?
is our next subcommittee meeting?
It is
21st.
Next Tuesday at 10 o'clock.
Tuesday 10. Got it. I want to make sure I was on the same page.
And I'll try to get that agenda put together faster than like the morning of.
And
Matt, what I'll do is I'll send that to you. You can take a look at it, and then if any changes, then you can make the changes, or if you like it, then I'll have you disperse it out to the group then, okay?
Perfect. Excellent. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Thanks, Matt.
All in favor?
Hey,
Right.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
great time, guys.
Good